Overseer, there's news from the League that a dimensional creature broke out from the sea and has infiltrated the East District. It might be coming to us, Ah Sheng said as he held a document that had just been faxed over. What level is the dimensional creature? And Tianzuo frowned and asked. I'm not too sure yet, but from the description of the document, it didn't easily break through the coastal defenses and even suffered some injuries. It should be an ordinary epic stage creature, Ah Sheng looked at the document and said, however, after it charged through the coastal defenses, the League hasn't been able to track it. They occasionally discover its traces and from its trajectory, it might pass through Luong. The League wants us to cooperate in stopping it. Overseer, what's your take on this? Strengthen the defenses and distribute the newly researched primordial gold bullets. Even if you can't kill it here, you can't let it do as it pleases in Luong, and Tianzuo said. Yes, Overseer. Ah Sheng received the order and left. With the help of the legendary Truth Listener earring, Zhou Wen felt like a fish in water. A few days later, he finally managed to remember all the content of the ancient Imperial Sutra. The moment he finished memorizing the ancient Imperial Sutra, he felt as if every cell in his body was igniting. His entire body became extremely hot, almost to the point of burning. As for the firebird horde that charged towards the blood-colored avatar, they retreated and returned to the furnace in front of the stone monument. Just as Zhou Wen thought his body was about to explode, the Lost Immortal Sutra came into effect, causing his body to turn completely still. In the next second, his primordial energy began circulating again. However, it was no longer the path of the Lost Immortal Sutra. It became the ancient Imperial Sutra that Zhou Wen had just memorized. The ancient Imperial Sutra could be described with one word: overbearing. Wherever primordial energy flowed, Zhou Wen felt as though all his cells had turned into explosives that could explode with unparalleled power. That searing, potent, and oppressive power was something Zhou Wen had never experienced in any of the other primordial energy arts he cultivated in. However, this overbearing power made him feel brimming with energy and vitality instead of destruction. When the ancient Imperial Sutra completed a cycle, Zhou Wen felt a strange change in his body. It was as though a casual punch could cause a rupture in the world. Looking at the blood-colored avatar's stats, he discovered that the values of the 4 attributes had changed from 10 to 11 points. Now, Zhou Wen had 3 stats at 11, leaving only 1 stat at 10. As he had mastered the ancient Imperial Sutra to a basic level, the blood-colored avatar could stand near the Fire God platform without firebirds appearing to attack him. Zhou Wen controlled the blood-colored avatar to walk up to the Fire God platform. The flames inside the furnace flickered but did not spew out any firebirds. He originally thought that Fire God platform would give him a companion egg, but he was ultimately disappointed. There was only a stone monument and a stone furnace on fire. One platform, nothing else, hence there was no one to give him a companion egg. So not every place has a mythical companion egg to give. Zhou Wen didn't feel disappointed as he carefully observed the stone monument and furnace. He had already noted down the words on the monument. Furthermore, he had already gained a basic mastery of the ancient Imperial Sutra, so there was nothing special about it. On the contrary, the stone furnace was rather strange and Zhou Wen couldn't help but be even more meticulous studying it. There were many firebird symbols on the outside of the stone furnace, but upon closer inspection, he realized that they were not firebirds but fire plumes of different shapes. There was something in the furnace that was burning with scarlet flames. Zhou Wen looked at it for a while before identifying it as a stone saber. It was in the furnace flames that burned vigorously. This only allowed him to make out its blurry outline. Is the stone saber in the furnace also a companion egg? Zhou Wen's heart skipped a beat as he made the blood-colored avatar attempt to remove the saber from the furnace. Since it was only a waste of a blood drop if the blood-colored avatar were to die, Zhou Wen was not stingy with making such attempts. After circulating the ancient Imperial Sutra to its limit, the blood-colored avatar's palm reached into the stone furnace. The flames in the furnace automatically parted, as though they were welcoming his hand. The flames split apart, revealing the stone saber stuck in the middle of the stone furnace. Zhou Wen could now see it clearly instead of a blurry outline. The first impression that he had of the stone saber was that it was rough. It was ground from black stone with many rough edges and uneven pot marks. It was nothing perfect or exquisite. However, this stone saber gave Zhou Wen an extremely oppressive feeling. It was as though it was the only thing that could claim to be supreme in the entire world as an ancient and desolate aura inundated him. On one side of the stone saber, there was a bloodstain. The blood-red color coupled with its shape made it look like a blood-red bolt of lightning. Without any hesitation, he controlled the blood-colored avatar to grab the handle, hoping to pull the stone saber out of the furnace. However, when the blood-colored avatar's palm touched the stone saber, Zhou Wen was stunned. The blood-colored avatar's palm seemed to pass through an illusion and did not touch it. Why is this happening? Zhou Wen tried a few more times, but the result was the same. The stone saber did not seem to exist at all, as though it was only an illusion. It was futile no matter how the blood-colored avatar tried to grab it. Time and again, its palm would pass through it. Zhou Wen spent a long time studying the situation on Fire God platform without figuring out what was going on. Could it be that the stone saber is really just an illusion? Zhou Wen stared at the stone saber in the game, but it didn't look like an illusion at all because the aura of the saber was just too potent. How could an illusion have such an aura? Now, Zhou Wen had the urge to immediately return to Guide Ancient City and scale the Fire God platform in reality. He wanted to see if there was a stone saber in the furnace. That was just an impulsive thought after all. It was impossible for him to return to the Guide ancient city, so he could only give up on his plan of obtaining the stone saber and leave the ancient imperial city dungeon. My 3 stats have already reached 11 points, so how can I find a primordial energy art to increase my speed to 11 points? Jowen only wanted to quickly advance to the legendary stage. Being at the mortal stage was just too weak. He would be slaughtered if he encountered true experts. Furthermore, only by advancing to the legendary stage could he incubate legendary companion eggs without any worries. Armor, weapons, necklaces, and other companion beasts were very helpful in improving his strength. After careful consideration, Jowen headed to the college library. He wanted to see if there were any other mysterious dimensional zones in Luoyang that had primordial energy arts. Unfortunately, he didn't find anything similar to Small Buddha Temple or Mount Laojun. At least in Luoyang, there was no place like that. Jowen browsed through the other dimensional zones in the league. He made some decent discoveries through this search. Boom. As Jowen was checking the information, he suddenly heard a loud boom. The entire library was shaking violently as a large amount of cement fell from above. Article 122 of 1597. Jowen immediately activated his lotus flower Buddha body. At the same time, he extended his silver wings and retreated more than 10 meters. His left hand, which was wrapped by the lotus flower bracer, shattered the large piece of concrete steel that came crashing towards him. Boom. Amidst the splattering dust and plaster, Jowen saw a huge green-scaled snake falling down from the hole in the roof. It shattered the bookshelf and the wood fragments flew everywhere as the ground opened up into a huge crater. A large number of fragments smashed onto Jowen. Thankfully, he had already activated Lotus Flower Buddha body, so none of the flying rubble harmed his body. The green-scaled snake was extremely large, spanning more than 100 meters long. It was as thick as a water barrel and on its back was a pair of gigantic wing-like fins. The students in the library dodged and screamed as they ran out. Although Jowen didn't know what was going on, he knew that he couldn't stay here for long. Just as he was about to flee the library, he saw the huge snake open its enormous mouth in a bid to devour a student. The student was too close to the spot where the snake had landed. A flying fragment of a steel slab had pierced through her calf and her body was pinned to the ground. She could not free herself to escape. Jowen took a look and realized that the student was Fangruoxi. With a thought, the silver-winged flying ant immediately separated from him and transformed into a silver stream of light, pulling her out before the snake could devour her. The silver-winged flying ant carried the injured Fangruoxi and flew back to Jowen's side. The enraged snake lifted its neck and opened its mouth, wanting to lunge towards him. Jowen was just about to flee when he suddenly heard a series of gunshots. A large number of soldiers jumped down from the hole and held their assault rifles in their hands. They fired unceasingly at the snake. Typically, hot weapons had limited impact on dimensional creatures even with nuclear bombs, much less bullets. They might even accelerate the mutation of dimensional creatures. However, when the soldiers' bullets hit the snake, they pierced through the scales and caused it to bleed. The snake began to twist its body and cry out as it tried to escape. However, it was already too late for it to escape. The soldiers continued firing at it. In just a few seconds, the gigantic snake had become riddled with holes. The snake's blood was everywhere. "Young Master Wen, are you all right?" A young man who looked like an officer rushed over and sized Jowen up before asking anxiously. "I'm fine." Jowen recognized the officer to be in Tianzuo's adjutant, Ah Sheng. "It's good that you're fine. Young Master Wen, you can go back now. There are still some matters to settle here." Ah Sheng called 2 soldiers over and asked them to escort Jowen and Fangruoxi out of the library. Fangruoxi's calf was injured and the steel slab was still piercing through it. Thankfully, the injury was not serious. The moment they left the library, the medical team rushed over with a doctor to treat Fangruoxi. "Thank you, Jowen. You took the risk to save me even though I treated you badly in the past," Fangruoxi said to Jowen. She had been brooding over the fact that she had failed to form a team with Jowen. "It's nothing. It wasn't much of a risk. If it were any other student, I would also have saved them. You don't have to think too much." Jowen turned around and left. The middle-aged female doctor who was treating Fangruoxi's wound almost burst out laughing when she saw the disappointment on Fangruoxi's face. She said, "Young lady, there's no loss missing out on such insensitive men. It's how he acts that makes him single. It will save you a lot of woe in the future." Fangruoxi blushed. "We're just ordinary classmates, don't think too much." The incident at the library caused quite a commotion on campus. The students were all discussing this matter. The college also gave an official account that a criminal was escaping with a companion beast and ended up entering the college accidentally under the military's pursuit. The criminal and the companion beast were both killed on the spot by the military. Jowen had seen the gigantic snake with his own eyes, but he didn't feel that it was a companion beast with an owner. It resembled more of a feral dimensional creature. Jowen himself also felt that it was impossible. After all, feral dimensional creatures weren't able to leave their dimensional zones. However, when he thought of the antelope in his dorm, he felt that it wasn't exactly possible. If all dimensional creatures can rush out of their dimensional zones, what would the human world become? Zhou Wen could not help but shudder when he thought of this possibility. The number of human experts had increased over the past few decades and epic experts were no longer rare. But compared to those dimensional creatures, they were still far inferior. Ignoring everything else, just like the three-faced Buddha in Small Buddha Temple and the expert who didn't even show his face at Mount Laojun, they were probably existences that few humans could match. Furthermore, there were many places like this on Earth. If there really comes a day when dimensional creatures are able to rush out of the dimensional zones, it would be the end of the world for humans. One must be strong enough to survive. Zhou Wen felt that the day wasn't too distant. The examples of the antelope and the snake made his sense of danger tingling. I still need to increase my strength. Zhou Wen felt the urgency to improve his strength he needed to have the ability to survive in such a disaster. After returning to his dorm, he decided to take a shower and change out of his tattered clothes and dirt-covered clothes before taking a shower to continue gaming. However, when he removed his clothes, he realized that there was a clamshell the size of an egg on the inside of his shirt. The clamshell's rainbow colors made it extremely beautiful. Zhou Wen casually pulled it off and was about to throw it away when he noticed something while holding it in his hand. Inside the clamshell was filled with blue seawater. Even if the clamshell was facing downwards, not a single drop of seawater stirred, it all remained inside. Zhou Wen was a little surprised to suddenly see waves rise up from the seawater. Ripples spread out and something slowly floated up in the middle. He was alarmed as he quickly threw away the clamshell. At the same time, he summoned his companion beasts and fused with them to prepare for battle. However, the clamshell that Zhou Wen threw was floating in midair. A petite, beautiful figure emerged from the rippling seawater. It was a mermaid-like creature with a head of golden wavy hair. However, her ears looked like fish fins and her eyes were blue like the sea, seemingly possessing an indescribable charm. Is this a mermaid or a siren? Zhou Wen frowned slightly. He was now sure that this was definitely a feral dimensional creature. Article 123 of 1597. Without much hesitation, the moment he saw the siren-like mermaid appear, the transparent wings on Zhou Wen's back vibrated and he slammed his feet on the ground, wanting to rush out from the balcony. There were too many unknown and terrifying existences in this world. Regardless of his chances of defeating a siren, Zhou Wen was unwilling to risk it. But just as he moved, a large amount of seawater burst out from the clamshell behind the siren. The egg-sized clamshell spewed out seawater like a waterfall that engulfed the entire living room. Zhou Wen's body collided with the waterfall formed by the seawater and immediately felt his body being pushed back into the living room like a wave. Kiki, foolish human. When standing before the Queen of the Sea, resistance is futile. Your only option is to become my slave and be used by me. The siren's body gradually walked out of the clamshell and gradually grew in size, becoming as big as an ordinary human. Zhou Wen gathered his strength and repeatedly slammed into the waterfall formed by the seawater. He was repelled every time. Even Astral Slash Blade left a tiny crack when he slashed down on the waterfall before the hole disappeared in the blink of an eye. It's useless, foolish human. Stop doing such foolish acts and become my slave. As the siren spoke, a strange light shone in her blue eyes, exuding an indescribable charm. Zhou Wen's gaze landed on the strange pair of eyes and his eyes immediately lost focus. As though in a trance, he dazedly walked towards the siren. Yes, that's right. Come into my embrace and be my slave. It's a great honor for a human. She spread out her arms and embraced Zhou Wen like a mother. At the same time, she was about to plant her pale blue lips on his forehead. Zhou Wen continued walking towards the siren in a daze, as though he was unaware of everything. All that was left in his eyes was the reflection of the siren's strange eyes. The siren's hands were already on Zhou Wen's shoulders and her lips were about to be planted on Zhou Wen's forehead when his originally dull eyes turned clear and limpid. His left hand, which was wrapped in a lotus bracer, rose up as his palm brought a Astral Slash Blade beam, slicing it straight at the siren's abdomen. With the augmentation of the lotus bracer, the Astral Slash Blade beam that combined 11 points of primordial energy violently struck the belly of the siren, leaving a mark on it. This act stunned the beautiful face of the siren. Perhaps it was overconfidence or that she didn't expect Zhou Wen to remain clear-headed under her gaze. The siren failed to react completely as she looked at Zhou Wen in disbelief. However, Zhou Wen didn't hesitate at all. His entire body rose up in an instant. He rained down his fists and knees like a thunderstorm, attacking the vital spots of the siren. The mutated lotus flower ant and the silver-winged flying ant were also summoned by Zhou Wen. They surrounded the siren on both sides, trying hard to severely injure the siren in the shortest time possible so that she wouldn't be capable of counterattacking. Bam! 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 Zhou Wen watched as the arm of the siren moved. Then, he and his two companion beasts retreated at the same time, slamming into the seawater waterfall before bouncing back and falling onto the ground. The siren stared coldly at Zhou Wen, her fingers touching the wound on her abdomen. The wound had strangely healed, not leaving any scars behind. Humans are despicable. They do not heed well-meaning advice, forcing me to take action myself. The siren stared coldly at Zhou Wen and swung its tail towards him. Bam! The moment the siren finished speaking, a hoof fell from above, knocking her down along with the clamshell. This caused the seawater waterfall, enclosing the living room, to collapse, restoring the living room to its original appearance. Zhou Wen saw that the siren was slumped on the floor and could not stand up no matter how hard she struggled. On her back, the white antelope was standing leisurely with its hoof stepping on her. It was as if it wasn't stepping on a terrifying dimensional creature but a block of wood. Zhou Wen didn't say another word as he immediately changed the mutated lotus flower ant into a bracer and sliced at the siren's neck. The siren was most likely an epic creature. No matter what dropped from killing her, it would fetch a good price. This was undoubtedly very tempting for the broke Zhou Wen. Of course, the main reason was to resolve any possible problems. He couldn't allow such a dangerous dimensional creature to continue living. This was too dangerous for Zhou Wen and his classmates. Don't kill me. As long as you're willing to let me go, I can share a huge secret with you, the siren hurriedly shouted. However, Zhou Wen ignored her and slit her neck with the edge of the lotus bracer. However, it only left a faint red mark on her fair neck. All he managed was a slight laceration. Zhou Wen was a little shocked. The lotus bracer was already considered a top-notch weapon amongst legendaries, but it could only tear open a tiny part of her skin. It was probably that this siren was a top existence among epic creatures. Brother Antelope, why don't you help me get rid of her? Zhou Wen said as he looked at the antelope on the siren's back. Unless Zhou Wen's primordial energy was restored, allowing him to use astral slash blade matched with his lotus bracer, it wouldn't be easy for him to kill this siren. Upon hearing Zhou Wen's words, the siren hurriedly exclaimed, I really have a huge secret to share with you. I've obtained the first order of chaos from the primordial god, Chaos. If you are willing to let me go, I can share it with you. What first order of chaos? Zhou Wen's heart stirred as he looked at the siren on the ground and asked. Zhou Wen had heard of the name Chaos before. It was a primordial god in Greek mythology. It was the first god to be born in Greek mythology. It was just that this god was not well known in the world, but his descendants were famous, ones that many knew. For example, the third-generation god king from Chaos's family line, Zeus of Olympus, Sea King, Poseidon, the goddess of wisdom, Athena, and sun god, Apollo were descendants of this god. Some people said that Chaos was one of the celestial gods of time, space, and space-time. Others said that Chaos was chaos itself. In any case, the status of this god in Greek mythology was akin to the Chinese myth of Pangu's splitting of the primordial egg. When the siren mentioned this name, Zhou Wen was rather surprised. Zhou Wen had heard that in some of the dimensional zones in the West District, many dimensional zones related to Zeus and the other gods were found. There were even second-generation titans found in some dimensional zones. However, he had never heard any news about Chaos. The first order of Chaos is the source of Lord Chaos's power. To you humans, that is Lord Zhao's primordial energy art, the siren hurriedly said. Article 124 of 1597. Did you bring out the first order of chaos? Is it the original version? Zhou Wen didn't really believe that the siren could obtain the original version of Chaos's primordial energy art. Although to Zhou Wen, the siren was very powerful, she was definitely not a top-notch expert among dimensional creatures. There were too many dimensional creatures that could kill her. For something as valuable as Chaos's primordial energy art, it was possible if the siren had taken out a copy, but the original copy was probably something not even mythical experts would move around casually, let alone a mere siren. However, a copy was useless to Zhou Wen. The Lost Immortal Sutra needed the original version of the primordial energy art to do its magic. The siren said, of course it's the original version. Don't look down on me. Although I'm not strong, Lord Chaos's blood runs through my veins. There's that tiny bit. After getting the first order of chaos, I escaped to the east. Then where is the first order of chaos? Show it to me now. If it's really useful, I can spare your life, Zhou Wen said. I can show you the first order of chaos, but you have to swear that you will return it to me after you see it and that you will let me leave safely. As the siren spoke, it glanced sideways at the antelope. The antelope seemed to have some interest in the first order of chaos that the sea demons mentioned. It bleated out twice as if urging the siren to take it out quickly. You don't have the right to bargain. Show me the item. If it's real, I can spare your life, Zhou Wen said coldly. All right. The siren hesitated for a while before clenching its teeth. It reached into the clamshell and pulled it out and handed it to Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen looked over and saw that the siren was holding a crystal ball, but it was different from an ordinary crystal ball. Within it were constantly changing light and shadows. Night, day, fire, lightning, wind, clouds, sun, moon, and stars kept flashing and disappearing. As they flashed, Zhou Wen could see the characters changing into words, vanishing when the light and darkness crossed each other. However, he didn't know what those words meant. They were different from the language he had learned in the League, probably an ancient language that predated the League. Although he couldn't read it, Zhou Wen was shocked to discover that his gaze was still attracted to the words in the crystal ball. He couldn't even look away as his body and mind changed along with the changes in the crystal ball. It felt as if he had entered the world within the crystal ball, feeling his body assaulted by all kinds of things, burned by flames, and struck by lightning. He shivered in the darkness and sank into the sea. It wasn't only Zhou Wen. Even the antelope, which was also staring fixedly at the crystal ball, seemed to suffer from dementia. Upon seeing this, the siren was delighted as a sinister smile appeared on her face. How can fools like you be able to withstand Lord Chaos's divine powers? Without the bloodline of Lord Chaos, reading the first order of chaos in the chaos space is simply courting death. The siren struggled to get up, hoping to kill Zhou Wen and the antelope who were entranced by the text in the crystal ball. However, with the antelope's body on her, it was like a mountain. Despite exerting all her strength, there was no way to break free. Damn it, how is this antelope so strong? Although I was injured before I escaped, I shouldn't be so weak that I can be suppressed by an epic creature. The siren wasn't anxious despite not being able to break free. The siren knew very clearly that as long as they spent more time looking at the first order of chaos, they would be assimilated very quickly and would be thrown uncontrollably into the chaos space. All she needed to do was wait patiently for the time to pass. After waiting for a moment, a look of doubtful shock flashed in the siren's eyes. Zhou Wen was clearly a mortal stage student, which gave him an upper limit of less than a minute before he should be pulled into the chaos space and be trapped inside. However, 2 to 3 minutes had already passed and Zhou Wen was still standing there looking at the chaos space. He had no intention of walking forward. This human is really strange. Thinking back to how her eyes had failed to entrance him, she couldn't help but examine him. For a mortal stage to perform as such, she believed that he might have some treasure on him. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain why he was able to resist her eyes and be able to look at the first order of chaos for so long. As for that antelope, she had already determined that it was an extremely powerful existence. It was not surprising that it could persist for so long. Thus, an extremely bizarre scene happened in the two-story living room of Zhou Wen's building. An antelope was standing on a mermaid, while a human and antelope were staring intently at the crystal ball held by the mermaid. Time ticked by. Half an hour later, the siren was certain that Zhou Wen must have an extremely powerful treasure when he still didn't walk towards the crystal ball. God really watches over me. Not only was I lucky to get the first order of chaos, but I actually have a powerful treasure to deliver itself to me. The siren was delighted and wished to immediately free herself from the antelope and search Zhou Wen's body for the treasure. Suddenly, the antelope on her back moved and slowly walked towards the crystal ball. They're finally moving. The siren was overjoyed. She threw the crystal ball into the air, causing it to float far away from her, making the antelope slowly walk towards it, getting off her in the process and giving her freedom. She had not thrown the crystal ball at the antelope earlier because she was afraid that with it pressing down on her body, it would also pull her into the crystal ball. The siren didn't take back the crystal ball immediately to deal with the antelope, but instead headed straight for Zhou Wen. Even a powerful creature like the antelope was attracted by the words in the first order of chaos, walking towards it involuntarily, yet Zhou Wen managed to be unfazed by it, affirming her belief that he had a powerful treasure on him, one not weaker than the chaos space. The siren wriggled her tail impatiently and swam towards Zhou Wen, but at that moment, Zhou Wen, who was standing there like a wooden pole, suddenly moved. The silver wings behind him spread out like a silver bolt of lightning and flew up into the air, lunging in the direction of the crystal ball where the chaos space was. The first reaction of the siren was that Zhou Wen finally couldn't withstand the power of the first order of chaos and was being attracted over to it. However, she immediately dismissed such a thought. How could people who were attracted by the first order of chaos use primordial energy skills and companion beasts? Zhou Wen was very close to the crystal ball to begin with. Therefore, with the siren's hesitation, he managed to grab onto it with one hand. You have a death wish. The siren didn't panic as she looked at Zhou Wen and sneered. Without a chaos bloodline, touching the chaos space would cause one to be sucked into it and be trapped inside forever. Article 125 of 1597. Even the siren with some of the chaos's bloodline couldn't easily touch the chaos space at first. Only after cultivating some of the first order of chaos could she use her hands to touch it before fleeing to the east. However, at the moment Zhou Wen grabbed the crystal ball, the expression of the siren changed. When he held it, it actually retracted its brilliance and everything within it vanished. The text of the first order of chaos naturally vanished as well. Seeing Zhou Wen play with the chaos space that had lost all its glow in his hands, the siren was dumbfounded. Impossible. How is this possible? You are an Eastern creature. You can't possibly have the blood of Lord Chaos, the siren spoke incoherently, unable to accept the fact that Zhou Wen had control over the chaos space. Meh. With the crystal ball controlled by Zhou Wen, the antelope immediately sobered up. It flew into a rage as it glared at the siren and let out an angry bleat. The siren shuddered and turned to flee. Unfortunately, it was too late. The third eye on the antelope's forehead opened and a blinding white light shot out and hit the siren. The latter didn't even let out a cry before it was sucked into the vertical eye of the antelope. The antelope closed its vertical eye and its mood changed for the better. It had been too careless and thought that nothing would happen with its strength. Yet, it fell for the siren's scheme and almost got sucked into the chaos space. If it wasn't for Zhou Wen, it would really have perished. Zhou Wen didn't notice the expression on the antelope's face as he fiddled with the crystal ball in his hand. It wasn't very big, about the size as a billiard ball. In the beginning, Zhou Wen had indeed been affected by the first order of chaos. Fortunately, after being influenced, the Lost Immortal Sutra slowly stopped its circulation, and when it restarted, it had turned into a brand new primordial energy art circulation method, naturally the first order of chaos. In fact, Zhou Wen had already regained his clarity of mind. However, he wasn't a match for the siren, and with the crystal ball in her hands, there was no way he could snatch it away from her, much less save the antelope. Without rescuing the antelope, he still wasn't the siren's match when she regained her freedom, so he could only wait for a chance. After the siren threw out the crystal ball, Zhou Wen knew that his opportunity had arrived. He snatched the crystal ball and controlled it with the power of the First Order of Chaos Primordial Energy Art, allowing the antelope to regain its lucidity. This crystal ball was indeed very strange. When Zhou Wen used the power of the First Order of Chaos to control it, he found that its interior was a huge space that could contain infinity. If he hadn't cultivated the First Order of Chaos, this crystal ball would only allow entry, just like a huge prison cell that didn't allow escape. However, after cultivating the First Order of Chaos, he could control it freely. It wasn't difficult for him to extract something from the chaos space. Isn't this equivalent to a huge storage space? With a thought, Zhou Wen injected the power of the First Order of Chaos into the crystal ball, causing it to shrink according to his will, and it soon became the size of a bean. However, it didn't shrink any further. Zhou Wen was naturally in a good mood after receiving such a magical crystal ball. However, although the Lost Immortal Sutra had helped him master the First Order of Chaos, it didn't increase any of his attributes. His strength, constitution, and primordial energy were still at 11 while his speed remained at 10. He thought for a moment before carefully taking in the power of the First Order of Chaos and guessed a probable reason. From what Zhou Wen sensed, the First Order of Chaos obviously had an effect on strengthening his primordial energy. However, his primordial energy attribute had already been enhanced by the wordless monument, so when cultivating a relatively similar First Order of Chaos, it wasn't of much use. He just had an additional primordial energy art to call his own. If my theory is correct, then I have to cultivate another primordial energy skill that improves speed, to raise my speed attribute to 11 points. Zhou Wen felt a slight headache. It was already very difficult to find a primordial energy art, and it had to be one that focused on increasing speed. The difficulty had increased quite significantly. The information I found in the library did mention lands of mystery similar to Small Buddha Temple and Mount Laojun, but how can I confirm that the primordial energy arts in that particular land of mystery will increase speed? Zhou Wen was a little vexed. Those lands of mystery weren't in Luang to begin with, and now there was such a limitation. Zhou Wen was momentarily at a loss where to find the primordial energy arts. I'll wait until after the comprehensive test. Zhou Wen couldn't leave the college now. So even if he had a target in mind, he wasn't able to go. The antelope sized up Zhou Wen and finally slumped back on the sofa, looking rather listless. Zhou Wen returned to his room and closed the door. He then took out the crystal ball that was about the size of a soybean and attempted to put things like teacups inside before retrieving them. It went very smoothly. Be it small items like teacups and spectacle boxes or bigger items like blankets or chairs, they could easily be put inside and retrieved. It was like a particular robot cat's pocket. However, after Zhou Wen mastered the complete First Order of Chaos, the mysterious light, shadows, and text in the crystal ball didn't appear again. It lost the ability to attract other creatures to enter by themselves. When Zhou Wen tried putting the mysterious phone into the crystal ball, he realized that it couldn't fit. After studying it for a while, Zhou Wen put away the crystal ball and went online to search for items like jewelry or accessories. In the past, all sorts of gemstones, jade, and diamonds were expensive. But now, the prices of those items were very cheap and ordinary people could buy them. Especially the price of diamonds, they weren't much more expensive than natural crystals be now. /B. Firstly, it was because diamonds weren't worth much with artificial diamonds capable of replacing the demand for natural diamonds. Furthermore, in this era, people were more willing to spend money on companion eggs and dimensional crystals. This caused the price of diamonds to naturally drop drastically. Now, an increasing number of high-level jewelry was made with dimensional crystals. Anyone who had a bit of money wouldn't wear ordinary diamonds. Zhou Wen was trying to hide the crystal ball inside an accessory. It was easy for others to suspect a single crystal, but it was difficult to feel any problems when the crystal was surrounded by several inlaid crystals similar to it. After all, the Chaos Space crystal ball usually looked no different from ordinary crystals. After some choosing, Zhou Wen chose a silver bracelet made of natural crystals and diamonds. Article 126 of 1597. Chapter 126 Bracelet. As Zhou Wen had deliberately chosen a seller in the same city, the silver bracelet he had bought over the internet was delivered the next afternoon. When he went to the school gates to get the delivery, he saw Ah Sheng driving up. Young Master Wen, Madam has ordered some dishes at a restaurant and wishes you to have a meal with her. Ah Sheng was so polite that it was embarrassing to reject him. Zhou Wen thought for a moment. Since he was going to the restaurant and not the Yin family's residence, there was no harm in him going. The bracelet didn't take up much space, so Zhou Wen didn't return to the dormitory first and got into Ah Sheng's car. Young Master Wen, rest for a while. It'll take about half an hour before we reach the place. Ah Sheng started the car and said to Zhou Wen as he drove. Aren't you in Tianzuo's adjutant? Why do you always work for Sister Lan? Zhou Wen asked curiously. Ah Sheng smiled and said, I'm the overseer's adjutant. Other than my usual duties, I'm also in charge of taking care of the overseer's life as well as the safety of the Yin family. You can think of me as half a butler of the Yin family. Zhou Wen nodded and didn't say anything more. As half an hour was just too long, he thought for a moment and opened the accessory box and took out the silver bracelet. The bracelet looked beautiful and exquisite. On it was quite a number of diamonds and crystals. Zhou Wen had only bought it after looking at the dimensions, so the size of the crystals was basically the same as the Chaos Space Crystal Ball. Zhou Wen carefully removed one of the crystals and then embedded the Chaos Space Crystal Ball. It looked perfect and he couldn't see any flaws. With the diamonds forming a contrast, the crystal ball wasn't eye-catching. Most people wouldn't purposely take note of the crystals on it. After trying it on his wrist, he found a problem. The space crystal pearl was indeed inconspicuous, but wearing this bracelet on a man's wrist seemed a little too conspicuous. The silver is a little too shiny and it's not hard enough. It breaks easily, so I think I'll buy another bracelet made of carbide later, Zhou Wen thought to himself and took the bracelet off and put it in the box. The box was a little too big to permit him to put it in his pocket, so Zhou Wen could only hold it in his hand. When he arrived at the restaurant, he realized that Jing was also there. "Little Wen, come over quickly. The dishes have already been ordered. We're just waiting for you." Ouyang-lan pulled Zhou Wen to sit beside her naturally. Although Zhou Wen didn't have a good impression of Jing, he didn't care too much about it. Since he was already here, he might as well sit down and accompany Ouyang-lan and leave after the meal. Jing sat on the other side of Ouyang-lan. She glanced at Zhou Wen but didn't say a word. She had an arrogant and cold expression. Ah Sheng had already ordered the staff to serve the dishes. Before they were served, Ouyang-lan saw the box in Zhou Wen's hand and asked, "Little Wen, what are you carrying?" Zhou Wen thought to himself, it's not a bad idea to let Ouyang-lan take a look too. If she doesn't notice anything, it would be even harder for others to notice anything amiss. "I bought a bracelet. Sister Lan, take a look." Zhou Wen handed the box over to Ouyang-lan. Ouyang-lan took the box and opened it to take a look. It was a silver bracelet worn by a lady. Although it was not an expensive item, its design was quite unique. "Little Wen, I didn't expect you to be so thoughtful. Is this a birthday present for little Jing? I didn't plan on telling you that it's her birthday today and just wanted to invite you to a meal. I never expected you to get her a gift." Ouyang-lan really imagined that Zhou Wen had bought a present. If not, why would a man like him bring a female bracelet here? Zhou Wen was stunned when he heard that. He didn't know that he had bought a female bracelet since he only bought it because the dimensions for embedding the Chaos Space Crystal Ball was perfect. If Ouyang-lan hadn't told him, he wouldn't have known that this was a female bracelet. And Jing also thought that Zhou Wen had really bought this bracelet for her. She felt a little ashamed in her heart. Zhou Wen is quite a nice person. I went a little overboard in the past. Should I find a chance to apologize? Just as Jing was thinking about this, she suddenly heard Zhou Wen say, "Sis Lan, I didn't know it was Jing's birthday today. This isn't a gift for her." And Jing's expression froze. For a moment, she had mixed, conflicted feelings. Ouyang-lan hurriedly changed the topic and said, "You bought such a pretty bracelet. Is there a girl you like?" Zhou Wen shook his head and said, "I bought the wrong item. I bought a male bracelet myself and ended up buying a female one. I'll have to return it later." This little rascal, he's like an impervious rock. Zhou Lingfeng is so good at reading people, so how did he give birth to such a brat? Ouyang-lan felt a little despondent hearing Zhou Wen's words. Since you bought the wrong item and have no intention of giving it to someone else, can't you just give it to Jing? It's not like a bracelet costs much. How could Ouyang-lan know that there was a Chaos Space Crystal Ball embedded in the bracelet? How could Zhou Wen give it to Jing? This meal was very awkward. Ouyang-lan didn't have a solution either. After quickly finishing the meal, she got Ah Sheng to take Zhou Wen back first. After Zhou Wen returned to the dormitory, he immediately ordered another bracelet online. This time, Zhou Wen was more careful and confirmed that it was a male bracelet. He even specially chose a carbide bracelet. After Zhou Wen received the new bracelet, he embedded the Chaos Space Crystal Ball into it and found it very suitable. Even if he looked closely, it was difficult to distinguish the Chaos Space Crystal bead from the diamonds and natural crystals. Moreover, most people wouldn't be able to see him wearing a bracelet with his sleeves usually covering it. After much effort, Zhou Wen finally managed to settle the bracelet. The date for the comprehensive test was already nearing. Read latest chapters at. He had not seen Li Xuan for days, perhaps a result of him working hard to improve his strength. He had the Li family backing him, so he had endless numbers of dimensional crystals and companion eggs. Raising his stats and contracting powerful legendary companion beasts wasn't a difficult task. It was expected that his strength would soar extremely quickly. Only on the day of the comprehensive test did Zhou Wen realize how many students Sunset College had. The dense horde of people probably numbered more than 10,000. There were 4 special zones on the field. In one area, there were about 100 pots with scorching hot oil. Blue smoke emitted from them as though it would ignite at any moment. In another zone, there was a 100-meter-long bridge made with 30-centimeter-wide calligraphic paper. It was probably the testing venue for crossing the paper bridge. The other 2 testing venues were quite far from Zhou Wen. He could only see a few stone tripod cauldrons and nothing else. "Old Zhou, how were your preparations? Are you confident of entering the top 10? Li Xuan came to Zhou Wen's side and threw his arm around his shoulder. Upon hearing Li Xuan's words, one of the group of female seniors beside them said with a laugh, "Juniors, you guys are really amusing. You want to get into the top 10 as freshmen? Nice dreams and aspirations. Here's me wishing you all the best as a senior." Article 127 of 1597. Seniors, since you think so highly of us, why don't we be friends? We should work on our communication for pure friendship at school. Li Xuan used this opportunity to chat with the seniors as he walked over. Just as they were happily chatting and Li Xuan was about to take a step further, they suddenly heard a commotion from the students. It was as though many female seniors were talking about a particular Brother Wei one. Ah. Brother Wei. Brother Wei, the female seniors who had been conversing with Li Xuan suddenly ignored him and began waving their hands in a different direction. Fuck, when did Sunset College become so liberal? Li Xuan was puzzled as he turned his head to look in the direction where the female seniors were waving their hands. He saw a boy walking towards the stage to speak on behalf of the students. When he saw the boy's appearance, Li Xuan said with a tinge of jealousy, "So what if you're president of the student council? You're only 2 years ahead of us. I'll be running for student council president later. I'll also be president." "Is he very strong?" Zhou Wen asked. "Not bad, I guess. The student council president of Sunset College usually has the strength to squeeze into the school's top 3. Before we arrived, this Wei Ji was considered the second strongest in the college. His life providence was about being all-rounded in both academics and martial arts. He is extremely fast at learning and mastering things when others need to spend a lot of time practicing. From martial arts and weapons to theoretical knowledge, he has never gotten second place after entering Sunset College." "Since he has never gotten second, why do you call him the second strongest?" Zhou Wen asked, perplexed. Li Xuan chuckled and said, "He hasn't been second before, but he has been beaten up badly by someone. However, that person was the weirdo, Huang Ji. Now the situation is different. The two of us are here in Sunset College, so he can only be fourth in the future." After Wei Ji delivered his speech, he did a demonstration for all the students in the 4 tests, mainly to teach the freshmen how the test was to be held. In the coin fishing in oil pots, there were a total of 100 pots with boiling oil inside. However, the 100 pots were split into 10 groups. Each group had 10 oil pots, and the further back the oil pots were, the higher the temperature. Normally, if one could pull out a coin from the pot with the lowest temperature, it would be considered a pass. This test is very dangerous. Before choosing it, you must consider it carefully. Even if you have decided to participate in it, please start with the oil pot with the lowest temperature, said Wei Ji as he summoned a companion beast, a black-furred gorilla. This is a black-heron gorilla at the mortal stage. Its constitution is at about 9 points, so it's considered top-notch among the mortal stage. With that said, Wei Ji ordered the black-heron gorilla to fish out the coin from the first oil pot. However, just as its claws reached into the pot, it screamed. The black-heron gorilla screamed as it retracted its claw, but the fur on it had already blistered. It looked very scary, and there was even a faint meat fragrance. Everyone's heart skipped a beat when they saw this. Those students who were originally hoping to try their luck immediately gave up on the idea of choosing this test. I believe everyone has seen it. You must be careful when choosing this option. Next, I will demonstrate it for everyone. Wei Ji smiled as he rolled up his sleeve. A red tattoo appeared on his smooth arm, a red-scaled snake. Following Wei Ji's summoning, the red-scaled snake tattoo on his arm seemed to come alive. It transformed into a red-scaled bracer that wrapped his entire arm and palm. Then, Wei Ji extended his hand into the oil pot and took out a coin as if nothing had happened. Following that, Wei Ji demonstrated the remaining 3 options, but he only did it for the lowest difficulty, mainly to let the freshmen know how the options were tested. Out of the 4 options, only crossing the paper bridge did not have any ranking. All the paper bridges were 100 meters long, and the results were determined by the time it took for one to cross. Tearing the calligraphic paper meant 0 points. Besides, one was not allowed to use flying companion beasts when crossing the paper bridge and had to walk on paper. Therefore, this was a huge obstacle for many students. After Wei Ji's demonstration, the students started signing up for the options they were participating in. Each of them had to declare at least 2, and of course, they could select all 4. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan declared that they were taking all 4 options as they wanted to enter the top 10. Therefore, not only did they need to complete the 4 options, but they also had to obtain good results. These 4 options didn't seem easy to Zhou Wen. It wasn't difficult to pass, but it wasn't easy to obtain a high score. However, the first student who went up on stage chose to fish the coin from the oil pot. Furthermore, he walked straight to the hottest pot in the row of 10. He casually stood in front of the pot and rolled up his sleeve. He did not use a companion beast, but his arm had a metallic sheen. It was unknown what primordial energy skill he used as he extended his hand into the pot and pulled out a coin. That guy's name is Wu Jun. He also has a younger sister named Wu Nan. It's very difficult to see the siblings in action. However, they have unfathomable strength, Li Xuan told Zhou Wen. Wu Jun's performance gave many of the students who had been frightened earlier hope. In the end, a freshman chose to fish the coin, believing that his primordial energy skill could help him pass. However, just the lowest temperature pot scalded his hand. Luckily, there were doctors present to provide him emergency treatment. After Wei Ji's demonstration, he watched from the side. When he saw Feng Qian choose to cross the paper bridge and obtain excellent results, breaking the previous record, he came to Feng Qian's side with a smile. Feng Qian, I've heard so much about you. Are you interested in joining the student council? Wei Ji asked with a smile. The students beside them looked at Feng Qian with envy. Those who could join the student council were all the college's top students. Normally, they would have to apply to join. Yet, the student council president, Wei Ji, personally invited him. To the typical student, it was a great honor. Not interested, Feng Qian replied expressionlessly as he walked past Wei Ji. Wei Ji only smiled. Those who were capable all had some character. He could understand that, but at the same time, he firmly believed that it was only a matter of time before Feng Qian joined the student council. He turned to look at Feng Qian and realized that he was actually walking towards Li Xuan. Wei Ji naturally recognized Li Xuan, a famous sign from Luang City. He couldn't help but be surprised that with Feng Qian's temper, he would actually have ties with Li Xuan. It was truly unbelievable. However, Wei Ji soon discovered that Feng Qian was not looking for Li Xuan but the boy standing beside him. Won the name of Viagra in Chinese. Article 128 of 1597. Chapter 128 The Rejected Wei Ji. With a careful look, Wei Ji recognized Zhou Wen. As the president of the student council, he paid attention to the top freshman. Wei Ji had already carefully studied Zhou Wen and Li Xuan's battle of the mutated Buddha Heart Lotus as well as the video of him slaying the word engraved demonized general. Zhou Wen's performance was indeed good, but it also exposed some problems. Therefore, Wei Ji had only placed Zhou Wen on a list of possible nominees as student council members. As for whether he would invite him to join in the future, it also depended on what life providence he obtained after he advanced to the legendary stage. Li Xuan was talking to Zhou Wen when he saw Feng Qian walking over. He found it odd, but ended up seeing Feng Qian walk straight towards Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen's heart skipped a beat when he saw Feng Qian. Could it be that Feng Qian found out that I was just being perfunctory with him and came to settle scores with me? Coach, when's the next class? Feng Qian asked Zhou Wen. Wait, coach. What's happening? Li Xuan widened his eyes as he looked at Feng Qian and Zhou Wen. Upon hearing Feng Qian's words, Zhou Wen's hanging heart eased. He said to Feng Qian, first, master what I said previously. We'll talk about the rest later. All right. Feng Qian agreed and sat down beside him. Old Zhou, what's going on? Li Xuan felt like a cat was clawing at his curiosity. He really couldn't understand why Feng Qian was acquainted with Zhou Wen and addressed him as coach. It's nothing. It's just that Feng Qian invited me to be his personal coach and tailor a training plan for him, Zhou Wen said casually. After Li Xuan heard this, the way he looked at Zhou Wen became even odder. With Feng Qian by his side, it wasn't appropriate for him to say anything. However, he thought to himself, what the hell? Feng Qian can hire any coach. It's not difficult even finding an epic expert as a personal coach for him. Why would he find a student from the same school? Furthermore, Zhou Wen hasn't even advanced to the legendary stage. Is Feng Qian bonkers to hire him as a coach? Li Xuan sat there uneasily, eager to know what had happened between Zhou Wen and Feng Qian. However, it wasn't the best place to ask him. When Wei Ji saw Feng Qian sitting beside Zhou Wen, he was somewhat surprised, but he didn't think too much about it. Seeing that Wang Lu had finally appeared on the field and had just registered for the tests she was taking, Wei Ji hurriedly went up to her and smiled like a gentleman. Wang Lu, I'm the student council president, Wei Ji. I wish to invite you to join the student council. Sorry, I don't plan on joining any club. Wang Lu politely rejected Wei Ji before walking towards Zhou Wen as well. Wei Ji was not surprised that Wang Lu had rejected him because her family background was obvious. Others might think highly of the student council's connections and influence, but Wang Lu had no need for it. However, when Wei Ji saw that Wang Lu had actually walked over to Zhou Wen and exchanged a few words with him before sitting down beside him, he couldn't help but be alarmed. When Wei Ji saw In Jing, he didn't mention the invitation to her. He just went up to greet her to acquaint himself with her. Sunset College was originally under the Yin family, so if she were to join the student council, she would definitely become president. When that happened, he would have to step down to the rank of vice president, so Wei Ji naturally wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Fortunately, after all this time, In Jing hadn't shown any intention of joining the student council. This relaxed Wei Ji a lot more. In Jing nodded politely as a response to Wei Ji before walking towards Zhou Wen again. What the hell is wrong with that punk? He's only been in Sunset College for a month, yet he already has such connections. Wei Ji was secretly alarmed as he couldn't help but think more highly of Zhou Wen. And Jing came in front of Zhou Wen. She looked at him and said, if you can get into the top 100 at the comprehensive test, I'll count you as winning the bet. With that, she walked away. Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback before recalling the 3-month declaration In Jing had made with him. However, he hadn't taken it to heart. So if she hadn't mentioned it at that moment, he would have already forgotten it. What bet? Li Xuan probed, his eagerness for gossip rearing its head. Nothing. Zhou Wen shook his head without saying a word. Wei Ji sized up Zhou Wen from a distance, wondering how he could pull him onto the student council. Since Zhou Wen had such connections, it would be of great help to the student council's future development if he could get him on the student council. Wei Ji could also use Zhou Wen's connections, perhaps to break into Wang Le's and in Jing's circle. As he was thinking, he saw Huang Ji walking over from the front. Wei Ji immediately changed directions, unwilling to meet Huang Ji. In this school, the person he hated the most and also didn't dare provoke the most was Huang Ji. In the past, he had wanted to rope Huang Ji onto the student council but had been rejected. Later, he used some tricks only to realize that Huang Ji was much more powerful than he had imagined. This ended up in him being beaten up. The school knew that Huang Ji had beaten him up, but they did not know why. Ever since that time, Wei Ji would circle around Huang Ji when he saw him. He had stopped thinking of roping Huang Ji onto the student council again. Moreover, he did not think that anyone had such a pull with Huang Ji. After Wei Ji circled around Huang Ji and looked back, he saw Zhou Wen stand up and wave at Huang Ji as though he was beckoning for him to head over. By then, Huang Ji had already taken a seat. With Wei Ji's understanding of him, he believed that Huang Ji definitely wouldn't bother with Zhou Wen. However, to his surprise, Huang Ji actually got up and walked over after hearing Zhou Wen calling out to him. When he arrived beside Zhou Wen, he began chatting very warmly with him. Wei Ji was dumbfounded. What's going on? That weirdo Huang Ji can actually chat with someone for so long. He had no idea that the reason Huang Ji was chatting with Zhou Wen for so long was that Zhou Wen was talking about his game and investment. That was why Huang Ji was so interested. This first-year freshman, Zhou Wen, needs serious observation. Wei Ji felt that it was necessary to reassess Zhou Wen again. If possible, he had to rope him onto the student council and be under his service. Not long after, Wei Ji saw Hui Haifeng and Nana walk over to Zhou Wen's side with a few high-ranking students. They seemed to be having a great chat with Zhou Wen and company, and his heart skipped a beat. By right, since he was the student council president, there shouldn't be anyone in Sunset College who could compete with him. However, Hui Haifeng was an exception. If Wei Ji was a classic model student at Sunset College, Hui Haifeng was a typical bad role model. Most of the students around him were people who didn't abide by the rules. Article 129 of 1597. Chapter 129 Perfect Score. Sunset College is indeed one of the best schools in the East District. There are just too many formidable people around. Li Xuan couldn't help but feel nervous when he saw someone raise the heaviest stone tripod cauldron. Zhou Wen had roughly guessed that based on the present situation, the two of them had to obtain perfect scores on at least 2 tests before they could enter the top 10. Hui Haifeng and Feng Qian had already passed the test, each scoring full marks on 3 and 9 points on the fourth. Hui Haifeng was 1 point short of crossing the paper bridge and Feng Qian was 1 point short in the coin fishing test. As Li Xuan expected, Wang Lu had indeed advanced to the legendary stage. Like in Jing, she had obtained 4 perfect scores very easily. Huang Ji hadn't taken the test, but considering how he had beaten up Wei Ji previously, Zhou Wen knew that it was highly likely that Huang Ji would receive 4 perfect scores as well. There were already 5 people in the top 10. In addition, there were Wu Jun and Wu Nan who had outstanding performances, leaving 3 spots left. Nah. That's not right. There are only 2 slots left. That Wei Ji will definitely score 4 perfect scores, warned Li Xuan. In that case, we need to obtain 4 perfect scores to safely enter the top 10, Zhou Wen pondered for a moment before saying and basically giving up. After all, he had yet to advance to the legendary stage. He could only rely on his companion beasts, so it was very difficult for him to score high. Hui Haifeng, Wang Lu, and company looked at Zhou Wen and Li Xuan with smiles. They had already received their results, so they were all waiting to see the duo's performance. We have to give it a try no matter what, Li Xuan said through clenched teeth. The situation was worse than he had expected. When the staff called out Zhou Wen's name, he had no choice but to head to the venue with oil pots to fish out a coin. Just as he was about to register with the staff and head on up, he was stopped by someone. Zhou Wen, mind if we have a chat? Wei Ji said with a smile. How may I help you? Zhou Wen stopped and asked Wei Ji. Let the other students take the test first. Let's have a chat at the side. Wei Ji led Zhou Wen to a quiet spot. Feel free to speak your mind, Zhou Wen said. Zhou Wen, you haven't advanced to the legendary stage yet, right? Are you confident of getting into the top 10? Wei Ji said when he saw Zhou Wen looking at him suspiciously. Don't misunderstand me. I don't have any other intentions. I just feel that you are a talent. It'll be a pity if you can't get into the top 10 because of your stage. What do you mean? Zhou Wen looked at Wei Ji in puzzlement, unsure what he was getting at. The student council still has an empty spot for vice president. I admire you very much and wish to recommend you to be the vice president of the student council. Wei Ji paused for a moment before smiling and saying, as a member of the student council, I will naturally do my best to help you. Perhaps it will help you enter the top 10 in the comprehensive test. Thank you for your kind intentions. However, I've already made an agreement with Li Xuan to organize a club on my own, Zhou Wen said. Sunset College had a clear rule that students who had already joined a club could not become members of the student council. This was to prevent some clubs from using the power of the student council to seek personal gains. Is that so? That's such a pity. The doors of the student council will always be open to you. If you ever change your mind, hit me up anytime. Wei Ji looked saddened but did not say anything else. Zhou Wen went to the staff to register before heading to the first test venue, fishing a coin from a pot of boiling oil. President, will Zhou Wen become the second Hui Haifeng? A student council member standing beside Wei Ji whispered. Wei Ji didn't answer him. He thought for a moment and asked, were you in charge of setting up the venue? Yes, it was all set up by our student council. Didn't you arrange for it? Zheng Tianlian was puzzled. I didn't arrange for you to tamper with it, right? Wei Ji narrowed his eyes at Zheng Tianlian. Zheng Tianlian's forehead immediately broke out into a cold sweat. He forced a smile and said, as expected, I can't hide anything from you, President. I was just trying to help some friends out. I wasn't trying anything else since all they wanted was a pass. Wei Ji said indifferently, you don't have to worry. I didn't say anything before, and I won't say anything now, but I need your help with something. If there's anything, President, please instruct us. We will definitely do it well, Zheng Tianlian hurriedly said. The difficulty of Zhou Wen's options should be lowered. The lower the level, the better. It's best if he gets 4 perfect scores, commented Wei Ji. Zheng Tianlian asked with a puzzled look, President, that Zhou Wen has already rejected you. Why are you still helping him? Rejection doesn't make him an enemy. This person isn't simple. There's no harm in doing him a favor. Wei Ji smiled at Zhou Wen when he said that. He didn't say certain things. If he were to become an enemy in the future, this matter might become a skeleton in the closet for Zhou Wen. Cheating was a serious matter at Sunset College. The punishment ranged from having a black mark on their records to being expelled. All right, I'll do it now. However, all we can do is adjust it within a certain range. If it's at the mortal stage, I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to get a perfect score, Zheng Tianlian said after some thought. Just do what needs to be done. Remember, I don't know anything, Wei Ji said. I got it, President. Don't worry, this has nothing to do with you at all, Zheng Tianlian said hurriedly. Zhou Wen came to the oil pot and was rather cautious. He began with the pot that had the lowest temperature. How many points do you think Zhou Wen will get? Li Xuan asked Hui Haifeng. Hui Haifeng shook his head and said, it's hard to say. Normally, without advancing to the legendary stage, he won't have any legendary companion beasts or primordial energy skills. Fishing out a coin from the 5th pot is already quite impressive. However, Zhou Wen is somewhat abnormal. He might have some unexpected results. It's about the same as I expected. With his abilities, I think he should be able to obtain around 7 points. It will be a little difficult to get any higher. Li Xuan knew Zhou Wen quite well. Read latest chapters at. In fact, Zhou Wen had roughly estimated getting such a score. Although the Lotus Flower Buddha body could protect him, it was a primordial energy skill that augmented his entire body. It was inferior to primordial energy skills that specialized in augmenting one's arm. Furthermore, his constitution wasn't comparable to those at the legendary stage. The latter might not even be able to obtain 10 points, so Zhou Wen estimated that he would get about 7 or 8. However, when Zhou Wen tried the oil pots one by one, he realized that the temperature of the pot wasn't as high as he imagined. He had managed to successfully take out a coin from the final pot and obtain full marks without any surprises. Although it was thanks to the Lotus Flower Bracer, Zhou Wen still felt that something was amiss. What? Looks like the test isn't that difficult. Li Xuan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Zhou Wen easily obtain a perfect score. He was just after Zhou Wen in fishing out the coin. Seeing how Zhou Wen had easily scored a perfect 10, he didn't bother wasting any more time as he directly headed straight for the 10th pot. To Li Xuan's surprise, when he extended his hand into the pot, believing that his immortal god of combat life providence and invincible connate divine art could protect him, he let out a loud cry. He hurriedly pulled out his hand only to see his skin scalded red. Article 130 of 1597. Chapter 130, Peerless Genius. Light novel world. Impossible. How can Zhou Wen fish out a coin while I can't? Li Xuan's expression was one of disbelief. However, the results of this option were set in stone. Li Xuan couldn't even fish out a single coin, putting his result at 0. Even if he received a perfect score on the other 3 options, there was no way he could squeeze into the top 10. Li Xuan felt a sense of regret. If he hadn't been careless and bore with it, he could have taken out the coin. After all, with the immortal god of war life providence, his hand wouldn't be crippled. One false step will lead to everlasting grief. Li Xuan nearly cried. Zhou Wen successfully passed the subsequent tests. Other than crossing the paper bridge at a slower speed, he obtained a perfect score on the other 3 options. Instantly, the entire school broke out into a flurry of discussion. People were trying to find out more about Zhou Wen. A freshman at the mortal stage had actually received 3 10s and 1 9. They were basically certain that he could enter the top 10. The results were really shocking. Although Wang Lu and Jing and Feng Qian were freshmen, they had already advanced to the legendary stage. It was understandable for them to have such results. It was shocking for Zhou Wen, who was at the mortal stage, to obtain such results. Instantly, the reputation of the peerless genius Zhou Wen spread throughout the school, but there were also teachers who had their doubts. They had seen their fair share of geniuses, but none of them could achieve such results at the mortal stage. The person who had the greatest suspicions was Wang Fei. She had wanted Zhou Wen to be stirred up by the comprehensive test and see if he could pull himself together, but to her surprise, Zhou Wen had managed to enter the top 10 and even obtained the qualifications to enter Providence Palace. She thought this was unacceptable. However, all the tests were carried out in front of everyone. Zhou Wen wasn't the first or the last one. People before and after him used the same equipment, so there wasn't any evidence to explain it away with cheating. It doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Why did I only get 3 9s? Yet, you obtained 3 10s and a 9. Li Xuan really couldn't accept this outcome. In fact, Li Xuan wasn't the only one who couldn't accept it. Zhou Wen also knew that his results were absolutely problematic. On the strength test, Zhou Wen knew very well that he couldn't lift the 10th stone tripod cauldron, yet, he had managed to raise it in the end. Furthermore, he felt that the 10th stone tripod wasn't any heavier than the 9th. It was impossible that there wasn't something fishy about it. How could Zhou Wen know that electromagnetic devices were installed at the bottom of the stone cauldron and the platform beneath them? Zheng Tianlian could control the power needed to lift the stone cauldron to a certain extent. The other tests had also been tampered with. However, they were done in an extremely unnoticeable fashion. Even the teachers did not know that the venue had already been tampered with during the setup. After the comprehensive test ended, the venue was dismantled, so no one would realize anything. All of this was something Zheng Tianlian had actually prepared for himself, hoping to use these methods to enter the top 10, but after he was exposed by Wei Ji, he didn't dare continue with the tampering. This ended up benefiting Zhou Wen. This resulted in Zhou Wen inexplicably gaining the reputation of a genius. When Wei Ji specially came to congratulate him, he even winked at him, making Zhou Wen, who had originally suspected Wei Ji, confirm his theory. Indeed, it was Wei Ji who tampered with it. But why did he do that? Is it to rope in a freshman to join the student council? Zhou Wen was perplexed. Regardless, Zhou Wen was famous in Sunset College. Since its establishment over the years, no mortal stage student had such results. As expected of Coach Feng Qian had zero doubts, believing that it was all Zhou Wen's true strength, so his determination at getting him to be his personal coach became firmer. Although there were people who had their doubts, they could only keep quiet because of a lack of evidence. Finally, the top 10 spots were confirmed. Without any surprises, Zhou Wen successfully entered the top 10 and obtained the qualification to enter Providence Palace. Old Zhou, I really can't accept it. Other things aside, your strength definitely isn't as great as mine. It doesn't make sense that you could lift the 10th stone tripod cauldron, but I couldn't. Li Xuan's face was filled with resentment. That's life for you. What else could Zhou Wen say? Thankfully, Li Xuan wasn't really bothered by the spot. All he did was gripe at Zhou Wen. I'm not bragging, but Zhou Wen is a genius amongst geniuses. Back when we were in Guide High School, everyone in our school knew that Zhou Wen was a genius. You know ascetic meditation, right? With how difficult it is to cultivate, the typical person won't even gain a basic mastery in primordial energy without a couple of years, even if they have primordial energy crystals. Yet, Zhou Wen forcibly mastered it without using a single primordial energy crystal. Tian Shandong's saliva splattered as he described anecdotes of Zhou Wen's past during high school to other students. Without Zhou Wen even realizing it, he had become an iconic figure amongst Sunset College's freshmen and was regarded as the most promising freshman in Sunset College. Although this wasn't the outcome Zhou Wen wished to see, obtaining the qualifications to enter Providence Palace was a pleasant surprise for him. The second day after the comprehensive test ended was the day Zhou Wen and the other 9 students entered Providence Palace. All of them received a token given by the school, and under the leadership of a counselor, they arrived at the legendary Providence Palace. Providence Palace was more magnificent than the Forbidden City. After becoming a dimensional zone, it gave people the feeling that it was magnificent and majestic. Although it was underground, it did not hinder Zhou Wen and the other students from marveling at the greatness of the ancient culture. Outside the entrance, Zhou Wen and company were waiting for it to open. Wang Lu looked around curiously. This place is about 1,000 meters deep and is surrounded by rocks. Where did those legendary treasures come from? Other dimensions, obviously. Do you really think there are ghosts? Hui Haifeng said with a smile. It wasn't Wei Ji's first time here, so he explained, those treasures flowed out of the dimensional rifts before flying into Providence Palace. There is no lack of precious, rare treasures. However, the typical rare treasures are only collectibles that can only be exchanged for money. The truly precious ones are the companion eggs and dimensional crystals. Among them are things that the East District doesn't have. If you are lucky enough, you might obtain a companion egg like an elf or an angel. They are pretty good selections. How does one know what type of companion eggs they are? Asked Wang Lu curiously. I really do not know. Let's not talk about identifying companion eggs, it's hard to even choose one, said Wei Ji. Why? Wang Lu was a little confused. Because all the treasures are in boxes. All we can see are those boxes. We don't even know what's inside. Once the box is chosen, we won't be able to change it. Therefore, we can only rely on luck to choose something, Hui Haifeng explained. Article 131 of 1597.